Great, wonderful. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending our webinar today on techniques for uploading and updating your data on DataStream. My name is Cal Dutta, current Acting Executive Director for EOS Eco Energy, and I am pleased to welcome everyone to our presentation. We begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are meeting on Indigenous land. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have stewarded and continue to care for this land. EOS would like to respectfully acknowledge that our work is done on the traditional unceded lands and waters of the Mi'kmaq. I will now give the floor over to Charlotte Hagelston-Renshaw, Data Specialist for DataStream, who will be leading today's presentation.
Thanks, Cal. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. So yeah, my name is Charlotte Hagelston-Renshaw. I'm a data specialist at DataStream. I've been here for about 2 years. I actually live in Montreal, but my job is to support data contributors, DataStream users, both in Quebec and in the Atlantic provinces. Je vais donner ce webinaire en anglais, mais n'hésitez pas à poser des questions en français ou m'écrire en français. So this will be in English, but feel free to ask questions in French if you'd like. Yeah, I think a lot of you maybe have already used DataStream, so I really hope you learned something new today that'll be useful to you. And if you've never used DataStream, we're going to start with a little introduction and a brief overview of our platform before talking about dataset metadata. And then we'll take a little break to allow for questions. And then in the second half of this webinar, we're really going to talk about the upload template and go over the steps for uploading. And there should be time for questions at the end. I'm also going to take some breaks for questions throughout the presentation, so you don't need to wait till the very end to ask any questions. Oh, it's a little slow. Okay. So yeah, we're a whole team at DataStream, software developers, water scientists, data specialists, and we're located all across the country. DataStream is now active across Canada in 5 hub regions. And essentially, DataStream's growth and success across Canada has a lot to do with strong collaborations with local and regional partners. So data contributors and users needs vary from place to place. So tapping into existing networks ensures that we're all responding to regional needs. And Atlantic DataStream specifically was our second hub to come online. We launched it in 2018 in collaboration with our regional partner, Atlantic Water Network. So DataStream is a registered Canadian charity dedicated to advancing freshwater protection through open data flows. And when we talk about our DataStream platform, we're referring to this open access site that we have for sharing and accessing water quality data. So DataStream is completely free and open for anyone to use. We really want to minimize barriers to both accessing and sharing data, and in doing this, foster connections and collaboration. And in Atlantic DataStream specifically, there are over 150 data sets that have been shared, and this data is coming from currently over 100 different monitoring groups. So if you're wondering what kind of data is on DataStream, we have over 1,000 different parameters that are currently being shared. So we focus on surface water quality, but we can also accept sediment water quality, and we're soon going to be able to accept groundwater quality as well. So if you're doing groundwater monitoring and you're interested in sharing data, feel free to reach out. So water quality data is collected across watersheds. We accept both field data and all sorts of lab data, including nutrients, metals, isotopes, pharmaceuticals, pesticides, E. coli, most parameters other than maybe like fish species diversity or something like that. So if just for general interest, why are groups monitoring? We pulled out some quotes from some data sets that have been shared on DataStream. So people are monitoring for all sorts of reasons. For context, people are monitoring for fish habitat recovery, for safe fishing and swimming, to just have longstanding data records for the water bodies that people care about, promoting watershed awareness, and so on, monitoring stressors and other reasons. And just as an overview, essentially how DataStream works is all these organizations are doing amazing work monitoring their watersheds. And then by uploading this data, water quality data to DataStream in a common data format that I'll talk about later, data can then be downloaded and also is more discoverable through metadata. So metadata makes data more searchable and findable. And then once this data is found and downloaded, it can be used for all sorts of things from education to research, planning and policy, and so on. So DataStream is a standardized database. This means that all monitoring results shared on DataStream are reported in a common format. This essentially makes data easier to interpret, integrate, and use. So when data is in a uniform format, you can analyze it and compare it essentially more easily. And DataStream's data standards are based on those of the US EPA's Water Quality Exchange. And these standards include different levels of metadata on locations, sampling methods, and so on. This is something I'm going to get into in the second half of the webinar. Before that, just kind of mentioning that essentially DataStream was designed with communities and users in mind. So we want to reduce barriers to sharing and accessing data. And our approach to achieving this is informed by principles set out in our data governance policy, which you can access on our website. I think the link is here. So just some things to keep in mind about DataStream. Data contributors always maintain ownership of their data when they share it on DataStream, and they maintain control over what they choose to publish or not publish. There's no data sharing agreement to share data on DataStream. Oops, sorry. So all data sets on DataStream are published under open data licenses, and these provide clarity around data ownership, attribution, and reuse. And there's more information about this on our website. But essentially, if you share data on DataStream and anyone wants to use your data, they'll need to credit you and cite you as the source of the data, or your organization, rather. So that's kind of like a brief introduction of DataStream. And I thought since maybe some of you have never used DataStream before, we'll give like just a very brief overview of what our platform looks like and how it works. So this is what we call the Explore map. This is basically the main page on DataStream where you can search and access data. So there's on the left, you have like different search and filter tools. And then if you zoom into areas on the map that you're interested in, you'll see all these little dots, and these represent unique monitoring sites. You can also see here we have different base maps, like the map is a bit different on these different sides. You can choose these. And so here are different filter tools. You can filter by region, you can filter by the most common characteristics. So if you want to look for, I don't know, pH data in a specific watershed, you can do that with these tools. And if you click on one of these monitoring locations, you'll see the coordinates and the name of the location. And you'll also see the data set to which this point belongs. So I'm going to use EOS EcoEnergy's data set as an example today. So by clicking on this link here, you'll actually get to the data set page, which looks something like this. So all data sets shared on DataStream have a page that looks like this. On the left, you've got all of the different monitoring locations for which data has been collected and shared. And then on the right is a graph, which shows you the values of a characteristic over time for the locations that you've selected. So you can like click these different locations on the left. And there's a drop-down menu here where you can choose which characteristic you'd like to visualize, depending on which ones were measured as part of this program. And you can also display the CCME, so the Canadian Council of Ministers of Environment's guidelines, which are for the protection of aquatic life. Some people find this feature useful. So they'll be displayed on your graph here. DataStream doesn't analyze data, but we do generate some summary statistics like minimum, maximum, mean values per parameter and per location. So you can see this in the statistics tab. And you can also download the dataset directly by clicking this download button that's circled. You can also download any attachments. So if you share data, you can attach any documents you think are relevant to understanding your dataset. You can also like download a picture of the graph if you want to use it for some other purpose. That's kind of a brief overview of what the platform looks like. I thought I'd pause here to see if there were any questions before we move on to like the more data sharing aspect. Um, I actually can't see the chat box right now, so if anyone wants to like jump in, feel free to do that. Otherwise, I'll keep going. Um,
Also, Charlotte, if there are any messages that pop up in the chat box, I'll be sure to read them aloud to you.
Thanks, that'd be great. I'll just keep going and we'll take a pause later to allow for questions. So yeah, now that we've given an overview of what DataStream looks like, how it works, I'm going to start to cover the different tasks that are involved with sharing data on DataStream. So this includes preparing your dataset metadata, then preparing your data for upload. We're going to talk about DataStream's data format, and I'll go over the different update types. So sometimes people wonder like what can be considered as a data set. So we don't have like a really strict strict guidelines on this, but just for some general guidelines. Generally, data that's collected as part of the same monitoring program by the same organizations and likely for the same purpose can be considered one data set, and you probably want to keep all this data together. One thing I wanted to mention is we're soon going to be releasing guidelines on sharing continuous time series data on DataStream. So more to come, but essentially we'll be asking that continuous time series data be uploaded separately from other types of data. Feel free to reach out if you have ever any questions on this. And also under this topic of what is a data set, I wanted to make the distinction between creating a new data set and updating an existing data set. So what a lot of people are doing is they'll have one data set for their organization, and then every year, every field season, they'll be just adding new data to the same data set over time to keep it all together. And we'll talk about this a little more soon in a few slides. But I wanted to start by kind of talking about dataset metadata. So when you create a new dataset on DataStream, you'll need to fill out this metadata form, which gives all sorts of information about your dataset. I will use EOSeco Energy's dataset as an example. So this is the form that you're going to fill out the first time you share your data on DataStream. But then once the data is published, you'll have your own dataset page, a publicly accessible page that looks kind of like this. So there'll be an abstract in which you can describe essentially anything you think is relevant to understanding and using your data. All data sets on DataStream have a DOI, which is the link that will always resolve back to this dataset page. You can include both the collection organization, data collection organization, and the upload organization if there's a difference. You'll have an email associated with it, and maybe won't go through all the different pieces of information, but you can put in keywords. There's also a citation, so anyone using your data anyone wanting to refer to your data could use this as a citation. You can acknowledge funding sources, anything else, data collection information. That kind of covers the metadata form. And I thought we would kind of include some tips on creating good dataset metadata. So one thing we recommend is avoid putting the sampling year in your dataset name. So unless you're sure that you're only going to be monitoring for 1 year, I'd avoid putting the year so that it's not you can add more years of data in the future. Although you can always change your dataset name if you'd like. We also recommend avoiding using acronyms without defining them. So if you do this, it might make it harder to find your data set. So using all names means your data set is more findable. And another point is that In the metadata, you can indicate the program status as either ongoing or completed. So ongoing means your monitoring program is active and you would plan to add more data, versus completed, which means this would indicate that there were no plans to add new data. So we recommend updating this status if ever you finish your monitoring program. And you can update your metadata at any time. It looks like this. So when you update your data set, you have these three options, which I'll go over. And if you click this third one, you'll have access to the metadata form where you can make any changes that you'd like to make. Okay, so I feel like this didn't take as long as I expected, but I'll take a little break here if anyone has any questions on metadata or like general information about DataStream before we go into the upload template. Maybe I'll wait like one minute and then I'll keep going.
Charlotte, do you mind if I just ask a question?
Yes, I mean, go ahead.
I guess for the people on the call that maybe have uploaded data so far, um, or previously, have you run into issues with regards to updating a data set with new data versus uh, updating existing data? We know this is something that has been a challenge for some people, so just trying to get a little bit of feedback if people have run into those kinds of issues in the past.
We can always come back to this at the
Yeah.
end if you like. Um,
Excuse me, Charlotte.
hmm?
Hi, it's Kim from Lot 11, and Patrick, I think I have found a little bit of issue just trying to figure out how the upload goes. Like I have last year's data online now with DataStream, and I'm attempting to put this year's on, and I think it's converting the file to CBS is my problem. So I'm hoping to find that out in a little bit here.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks, Kim. I do have a slide on converting your data set to a CSV format later
Perfect.
on, towards the end. But if we don't answer your question, feel free to bring it up again. All right. I'll keep going on the upload template then. This will probably take a bit longer to get through, but feel free to, and anyone can like jump in if you have questions or would like me to like re-explain a slide or something like that. Okay, so yeah, preparing data for upload. Essentially, the most common method that is being used is using DataStream's upload template. So we have both an Excel and a Google Sheets version. I would say this is maybe our preferred method for formatting your data, but I'll mention a few other options in case these are applicable to you. If you're sharing data on Water Rangers or any open access platform, or even if it's not open access, I think it can work. Something like the New Brunswick government's open data portal or any other government data portal. We can actually potentially set up a process where this data shared on another portal can be automatically imported into DataStream. So if this is the case, just reach out to us about this and we'll figure this out or look into it. Another option for preparing your data for upload would be using a custom R script or Python script or another language. So if this is something that you're more comfortable in, it's also possible to create like a custom script option for formatting your data. This is what personally I would use. I mean, it's personally what I use, but we recommend using the upload template. So the DataStream upload template is good if you are comfortable using or learning to use Excel or Google Sheets. It's the most accessible method, and it's also appropriate. Sorry, I'll move this. It's also appropriate if you don't have more than about 100,000 rows of data. So if you do have 100,000 or hundreds of thousands of rows of data, Excel can kind of be laggy and sometimes it crashes. So if this is the amount of data you have, I suggest like reaching out to us and we'll look into other options. But I think most people have smaller amounts than this, and Excel should or Google Sheets should work well. So just a kind of general note on how the data sets are structured. Basically, when we refer to fields, we're talking about these columns, and they all have unique names in DataStream. So things like the monitoring location name or the activity start date. So these are columns, and then the rows, each row corresponds to an observation or a value that you've measured. So, for example, you have a pH value of 7.1 measured on a specific date at a specific location. This is in one row. And just a note on using a custom script, this can be used for like pivoting data, aligning date formats, and automating repeated tasks. So when you're uploading data, there are essentially three options. I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, but you can either create a new data set or you can add data to an existing data set. So like every year, every sampling or every field season, maybe you're adding more data to your data set. There's a third option, which is to replace your data set with a new version. So if at some point you realize that there are some errors in the data that you've uploaded to DataStream, maybe some of the values are incorrect, or maybe you'd like to change the name of the location, you can do this at any time. You'll just replace your data set with a new version. And in doing this, you can actually also add new data at the same time because you're just replacing the data set. On our website, we have lots of resources on uploading data, formatting your data. We have also some how-to videos that'll explain, like, it'll show you the steps and things you need to click to upload your CSV file. So you can check out our website if you'd like more information. And if you've never used DataStream before, just a note that you'll just need to create an account. You'll just go on our website and click sign up. And just please let us know when you've created your account so that we can approve it. And this will allow you to share your data on DataStream. So here are the steps for reference for creating a new data set. So just briefly, you'll essentially log into your account. You'll click a button, or you'll click the Upload Data tab on the top of the page, and you'll just click the Add New Dataset button. From here, you can fill out this metadata form and then upload your CSV file, which contains your data. Then you'll have an option to preview your data set on DataStream. So in case you'd like to make any changes, you can still do that. And then when you're ready, you just click Approve Dataset to publish it. So I've included the steps here for reference. I think we're going to share this PowerPoint at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to go over the different types of updates. So one option is to add new data. So you're essentially just appending data to your existing data set. I didn't include a screenshot here, but essentially when you update your data set, it will prompt you to enter something called the change log. So you'll basically just briefly describe the changes that you're making. You can write, for example, added April 2024 data for pH and temperature or something like that, just to keep track of your changes. And this is just a little detail, but if you've ever noticed, if you're using DataStream and you have these version numbers on your data set, what they mean is when you add new data, it's called a minor change. And so your version will go from 4.3 to 4.4, 4.5, and so on. Just a detail. So to add new data, you're going to select this first option called Add New Data as the update type. And now I'll explain the second option, which is Modify Existing Data. So with this option, this is for, as I mentioned before, replacing your entire data set with a new version. So if you need to correct errors in published data, you can do that here. You can also add new data at the same time. You'll also be prompted to describe your changes, and the version number here will change from, for example, 4.3 to 5. So like the first number will change with this replacing of your data set. So yeah, just to keep in mind that there are these 3 different options. So the first one is to add new data. The second one will actually replace your entire data set with a new version. And then this third one, edit metadata, is just to edit the metadata for your data set. And if you need to modify your published data, you can do this anytime. And just the basic steps would be you'll need to download the data set as it is currently on DataStream. So you can click the download button here. And then any changes that you'd like to make, you should make in this CSV file. And then you'll just re-upload this new version of your data set, again, selecting this modify existing data option as the update type. If you ever want to do this and you need some assistance, feel free to reach out. We can definitely help you with this. So as I mentioned, the changelog is basically the dataset version history. So this is a section on your dataset metadata page. Again, this is like just a detail that I'm bringing up. But you'll see here the history of all the changes that you've made to your data set. So you can see this is, again, EOSeco Energy's data set where they've described their changes each time they've made some. So for example, in version 6, they re-uploaded their data set to make some edits. They did the same thing with version 7, so they replaced their data set to make amends to one of the columns. And then in version 7.1, so I don't know if you can see my mouse, maybe not. But essentially from 7 to 7.1, they just added new data. And they've described this here as added chlorophyll A bottle data for 2021. So, and you can always re-download the files that you've uploaded to DataStream. This is where you can do that. So I was gonna take a little break here to see if there are any questions about the upload types. Otherwise, I thought maybe we could take like a 5-minute break maybe before going on in case anyone needs a break. But I'll stay on here if there are any questions. And I think after we'll talk about the upload template itself.
I actually just wanted to ask Charlotte, I don't know if this has already been touched on or will be later in the presentation, but we were previously uploading separate data sets, I think, for each year of sampling we did, and we went back and combined them all into one data set. I was wondering if that's something that like you've had other groups have questions about or needed assistance with, and if that would be something you could go over as well
Yeah,
briefly today.
thanks. Yeah, that's a good point. I've only seen that happen a few times, but it does come up. So yeah, I guess the question is like, so you might have created many data sets and then you want to combine them. I don't recall what the reason was for you doing this. Maybe you want to share?
Yeah, we had a rotating sampling schedule. So every year, like every 3 years, we would be going to different watersheds in our area. So our sampling regime was a little bit different, I think, for that. We weren't sampling the same sites every year. So it felt like it made sense initially to do separate data sets. We've changed finally our rotational sampling scheme, which I think is why we ended up going and combining everything together. But that was the initial thinking there, I believe.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it's happened a couple times. I think a few times I've seen people maybe have created several data sets kind of by accident because it wasn't the same person uploading one year to the next. And so then they want to combine them so that they can, for example, they'll want to visualize all their data at once on the same graph. And as I said, if you're sampling at the same locations, one year after the next, it makes sense to keep this data set in keep this data in one data set, so that you can like visualize it all together. And also, I think having data in one data set makes your data more findable because if you have many data sets and someone is looking for data from your organization, they might miss one. So that's another reason why we recommend like limiting the number of data sets unless necessary.
Yeah, for sure, that makes
Sometimes,
sense.
yeah, good. Sometimes people will create a separate data set if they now have they're now sampling with a different organization, like in partnership with a different organization, or maybe the funding sources have changed, and so the objectives of the sampling has changed. That could be a reason for making a separate data set.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Charlotte.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Maybe we'll take just like a 2-minute break in case anyone would like to, and then we can come back. But I'll stay here if anyone has any questions.
I have a question for you, Charlotte. If you change your dataset name on DataStream, do you then have to append the existing datasets to include that new name? Or when you upload new ones, do you just include it then?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we've actually just made an update on this. Before, you needed to actually re-upload your data set to change the name. But I believe now we've made a change so that you can if you'd like to change your data set name, you just go into the metadata form and edit it there, and it'll apply the change to your data set, if that makes sense.
Perfect.
Yeah. I'd say this is kind of an exception in terms of editing your CSV. We don't make any changes to the data set that you've uploaded, except now we do allow you to change the name without like re-uploading your CSV file. But that's the only change that you can make that way. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so in the second half of this webinar, we wanted to go through the upload template and kind of go through the different tabs that you need to fill out, explain some of the fields, and give you maybe some tips and tricks you might find helpful. Just in case you've never seen the DataStream template, it looks like this. So you've got all these different tabs. They look like there are a lot of tabs, but you actually only need to fill out 4 of them. And most of the tabs are here to give you more information. So for example, there's a tab that gives you the instructions on how to fill this out. And there's a tab for tips and tricks in it. So just something to keep in mind. Yeah, I'll go over that now. Okay, so here are just the main steps for using the DataStream upload template, which is used to format your data for DataStream. So the first thing you'll do is enter a dataset name in the metadata tab, so you can choose a name for your dataset. And then you're going to fill out the locations tab, the characteristics tab, and the results tab. Once these 3 or 4 tabs are complete, you'll just need to refresh the tab that's called export. And essentially, there's formatting in Excel, which will put all your data together in this tab in the format that's needed for DataStream. If you're using Google Sheets, you actually don't need to refresh the tab. It will update automatically. And then you'll save this export tab as a CSV file, and this is what you'll upload to DataStream. So just to start, I wanted to mention 2, I think, pretty important upload tips. One is to always start with a fresh template. So if you're adding data to your data set, we really recommend that you go on our website and download a fresh version of the template, and you can always copy over information from another template. Essentially, it seems that a lot of issues that people encounter with the template are resolved by just doing this. I think sometimes like the formatting can be a little bit messed up, or maybe you copy over formatting by accident. So start with a fresh template. And we also recommend, if you're pasting into your template, always pasting as values. So I've taken a screenshot of what that looks like here. It's this second option. So use a fresh template and paste as values to avoid some issues with the template. Just as general information on how the template works, you'll see that there are different colored cells. So if the cell is red, this means that this field is required, so you'll need to enter a value. It'll also turn red if you enter a value that's not allowed. And once you've entered a value in a cell in Excel or in Google Sheets and it's accepted, it'll turn green to show you that you've entered it correctly. And then any fields that are yellow mean they're just not required. So you can fill them if you want to, but you don't have to. And as I mentioned, since DataStream is a standardized database, a lot of these fields or columns aren't like free text fields, so you can't enter anything necessarily. You have to choose from a list of allowed values. So any fields that require an allowed value have these drop-down menus that you can see in the screenshot, and then you can select from the menu there. So I'll start with the Locations tab. So you'll fill out this Locations tab with information on your sampling locations. So each row in this tab corresponds to one sampling location. For each location, you'll give it an ID and a name. Some people choose to use the same for both, which is okay too, but we recommend an ID and a name. So usually an ID is like a short code for referring to your location to make sure that it's like a unique identifier. And then the monitoring location name can be a bit longer and descriptive, as in this example. So the name could be Joe Brook, and then the ID is like a standardized code or a code that you can choose. Then each location should be associated with coordinates, so longitude, latitude. These are in decimal degrees. Coordinates also need to be associated with a coordinate reference system. So this is the column called monitoring location horizontal coordinate reference system. And then you also need to input a monitoring location type. So this is the drop-down menu, and you can choose here if it's a river, stream, a lake, pond, estuary, and so on. So I often get questions about the coordinate reference system, so I've included a slide here. I won't go into detail about what it is. It's basically how a two-dimensional projected map is related to real locations on the Earth. But it's something that's associated with, the coordinate reference system is something associated with coordinates. It's this column, in this column that you'll need to input it, and it's important to include. So here are the three most common for Canada, which will likely apply to your coordinates. If you are getting your coordinates using Google Maps, it's going to be this WGS 84 that you should input. Otherwise, if you're using a GPS, usually this is something you can change in the settings and you can verify it there. So that's the coordinate reference system field for your locations. And so I wanted to include also a little couple slides on duplicate locations because this is something that occurs. So basically, one monitoring location should be associated with one ID, one name, and one set of coordinates, as in this example. Then I've included two examples here on the bottom that can lead to duplicate locations. So in this first example here, you have on both lines, on both rows, you have the exact same latitude and longitude and the same ID, but two different names. So maybe this could be because one year one person is doing the sampling and the second year it's a different person. Maybe they choose a different name. But this will essentially create two different locations in your data set. And you can see that the monitoring location ID column turns red if this happens because it's showing you that you shouldn't have the same ID with two different names. Another situation that can lead to duplicate locations is if you have two, so in the second example here, you have two different sets of coordinates, but that are both associated with the same ID and name. So essentially you're creating two locations with the same ID and name, but different coordinates. So if you were to upload data like this onto DataStream, it would look like this. So for this Joe Brook location, you'd see that you can see on the map that there are two different locations with the same name and ID. So these would be duplicates. And then for this other location, you essentially, in this example, there are two different names for the same location. So on the map, you can just see one point because they both have the same coordinates, so you can't see both of them on the map. It's the same location. So also, if this is the case in your data set, you're going to get a warning when you upload the data to DataStream. It'll tell you that there's several coordinates with the same location ID or several names with the same location ID. And if you ever get warnings like this and you're not sure how to resolve them, you can just reach out to us and we'll help you out with that if you like. On the same topic of duplicate locations, kind of, or on coordinates in general, it's possible to input a accuracy measure to your coordinates. So these two fields here, monitoring location horizontal accuracy measure and monitoring location horizontal accuracy unit, can be used for this. So if, for example, you have coordinates for the same location that vary a little bit across years, or if you're just unsure of the accuracy of the coordinates, you can input, for example, 5 meters, which is the example here, meaning that the coordinates that you've entered, you've entered coordinates, but the exact location is within 5 meters of these coordinates, if that makes sense. So just a couple tips on location, or one here essentially. Sometimes I've seen people put sampling depth in the location name, and we don't recommend this because it's not really a standardized way of reporting this information. So if you have sampling depths you'd like to report, I'll get to this in a few slides, but you can basically input this in its own field in the results tab. I'll show you an example in a few minutes. But I thought I'd pause here in case there are questions on the locations tab before we move on to the characteristics tab. I'll just wait maybe 10 seconds or so if anyone wants to jump in. Just feel free to write questions in the chat box too if you like. Otherwise, I'll keep going with the characteristics metadata. Okay, so that's the locations tab that you'll fill out. And then you'll fill out this characteristics metadata tab. So when we talk about characteristics, we're basically referring to parameters. So any physical properties or chemical substances that you're measuring in your water quality samples. Basically, so each row in this tab corresponds to one characteristic. You'll need to choose an ID for each characteristic. This is actually not included in your final data. It's just necessary for Excel to join your results to your characteristics data. So I'll go through the different columns or fields included in this tab. So the column B is the activity type. So the most common for these would be sample routine if you're collecting samples that are analyzed at a lab. If you're just doing field measurements, you can use this field measurement observation value. There's also a value for portable data logger and others. You can look at the drop-down menu. The activity media name will likely be surface water unless you're measuring something like air temperature, in which case you input ambient air. The column sample collection equipment name is optional, but can indicate the equipment you've used for sampling, so probe, sensor, water bottle. And then this characteristic name field is pretty important because since DataStream is a standardized database, you need to choose this, basically the spelling of the characteristic is important, and you'll need to choose this from a list of allowed values. So for example, if you're measuring water temperature, you need to enter it as temperature, comma, water, and not as something else. Otherwise, there's a field for result unit. This is also chosen from a list of allowed values. And this field called result value type essentially will likely be actual. You can input as actual unless you are reporting data that you've calculated based on other parameters. So as I'm saying that a lot of the values of these columns need to be chosen from a list of allowed values. What I mean is there's a tab called allowed values here, where for every column, it'll list all the possible values that you can input. There's also one specifically for characteristic names. So if you are not sure how to input the characteristic that you've measured, like temperature phosphorus, whatever, you can search in these tables to find the value. And if you're ever not sure how to input it, you can just send us an email and we'll help you out. So the fields that I've just described are kind of required for all data, but some data that's analyzed, and basically data that's analyzed in a lab will require more information. So we're still in the characteristics tab here. But when you input data that's analyzed at a lab, you'll need to indicate the name of the lab in this laboratory name column here. And then you'll also need to input information on the methods that were used. So you can input the name of the method here and result analytical method name. It's also possible to report this with an ID and context. So basically, these are standardized codes associated with methods. If you look at the lab report you received from a lab, usually this will be indicated. And if it's not, we can contact the lab to ask them what this would be. We also have resources for this on our website, which I'll show you in a few slides. Again, this is not required for all parameters. This is mostly for lab analyzed parameters. So if you're just doing field data, you really don't need to worry about these last couple slides. But for some parameters, for some characteristics rather, it will require a speciation method and a sample fraction. If it's required, the cell will turn red. So basically, a speciation method identifies the chemical speciation. So for phosphorus, it could be as P, as phosphorus. And then the result sample fraction describes the portion of the sample or the portion of the characteristic that's being analyzed. So this is something essentially indicating, for example, if the sample is filtered before it's analyzed or not. Again, this is something that the lab that analyzed the data can provide. And we do have resources on our website for figuring this out. So there's a page we have a nutrient data guidance page, which will help you determine the speciation method and the sample fraction. And then we also have something like this for metals as well. So this can help you determine the result sample fraction, which can be determined using this guide. In my experience, it seems like filling out the characteristic tab sometimes can be the trickiest if you're not familiar with how your data was analyzed. So we're more than happy to help fill this out if ever you're unsure. We fill this tab out often. So yeah, just reach out if you have questions. If you're analyzing this type of data and you have questions on how to report it in DataStream, we can definitely help you out with this step. Yeah, we recommend all these resources for inputting characteristics metadata, especially if it's lab data. Another helpful resource we have on top of these nutrients and metals guidance documents is we have this document where essentially if you're analyzing your data at RPC labs, it will tell you in this document how to fill out the characteristics tab. So you can just copy paste information from this document. The link is here. So for example, if you're measuring nitrate at RPC, it'll tell you need to input this as nitrate as the characteristic name, using the speciation method and this result sample fraction, and so on. So this can maybe be helpful if you're using RPC or some of these other labs. Okay, I wanted to note that you can also input detection limits with your data. So this will also be something that's indicated on your lab report. So again, this is not for field data necessarily. This is more for lab data. So if you want to enter detection limits, there are 3 fields you'll need to fill out in the characteristics tab. One is this result detection quantitation limit measure, where you'll indicate the value of the limit. and then you'll indicate the unit of the limit. And then you will need to input a limit type. So there are 4 different types here. I won't go too in detail on these definitions, but I've included them here. Basically, if there's a detection limit, your lab report will probably indicate the type, whether it's method detection level or sample detection limit. These are different types of limits. And if you are unable to determine the specific type of limit, you can also use this reporting limit value. So you can just write reporting limit here and input your limits. So just to end on some general tips for inputting your characteristics data, we recommend using the lab mappings for RPC. If you're analyzing samples at RPC, you can consult our metal series and nutrients data guidance. I mentioned this briefly, but this activity media name field, usually you'll input surface water to indicate that this is a surface water sample, but if you're measuring something like air temperature or atmospheric pressure, this activity media name should be entered as ambient air to indicate what's actually being measured. Another thing I wanted to note is that the unit parts per thousand is inputted as ppth, not as ppt, which is process that you find challenging, like the formatting, the uploading, finding the data on DataStream. If you have any suggestions on other types of resources we can provide, other than what's on our website, we'd love to hear it. And as I said, if there are any data use cases you'd like to share, we'd love to hear about them. But thanks so much for being here. Yeah, I'll stop sharing maybe.
Yeah, and thanks so much, Charlotte, for that presentation. It was very informative. I think that's why there was just a lot of information. Everyone was taking some time to take it all in. In terms of a Q&A right now, I'll stop recording the presentation if anyone's more comfortable asking questions without being recorded. So I'll do that right now.